Welcome to What It Takes, a podcast built to provide valuable insights for people just like you. Here we discuss industry-specific details of what it takes to navigate a journey of professional success from those that have already done it. We're not here to be vague. We're here to get to the nitty-gritty of it all. And today we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of what it takes to start a carpet cleaning business, a franchise, sell out to a private equity group, and I don't know, a million other things with our guest, Seth Hopkins. I'm Keaton Epps, here with my co-host, Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, awesome. Seth, glad to have you here. Let me read a little bio on Seth. So Seth was born in 1982 in Houston, Texas, to John and Leslie Hopkins. Seth is the fourth of 10 children, 7 girls and 3 boys. When he was 10, his family moved to Orem, Utah. He went to high school at Orem High and played football there. Seth went on a 2-year mission to Sydney, Australia, met his wonderful wife, Marguerite, in Dallas, Texas in 2005. They now have 4 amazing children. Seth has spent the majority of his career in sales, having worked at Zero Res since 2004 and became an owner of Zero Res in 2015. Seth loves God, our country, and smoking meat.
That's what I'm talking about, baby.
That's right.
That's it. That's all you need right there.
That's right, man.
Oh, that's great.
Meat, you're not living, that's for sure.
So Seth makes a mean brisket. I'll have to say that.
Are you a pit boss, or what do you call yourself? Are you
I'm kind of the jack of all trades when it comes to smoking meat. I love to do everything, but I've been doing it for probably over 12 years now. So I've just really enjoyed doing that, and Tom, for whatever reason, has been a beneficiary of that often. And he, when you put a smile on Tom's face, it kind of gives you a little energy level. I don't know what it is.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
That meat, when Seth drops off some meat sometimes in my home, brings that piece of brisket or burnt ends or what'd you do? Pork belly. Just melts in your mouth. Seth, he is a meat master for sure.
So who's your smoker? Who do you trust?
I love Kamado Joe. I've been using a Kamado Joe for 6 years now, and it just does everything. You can grill, smoke, bake. I got the Joe Tisserie with it as well, so you can do prime ribs and chickens. And
oh man,
you can do
talking my language. Yeah, you're just getting me all kind of revved up in all different ways right now. Yeah. I already learned something new. I'm sure I'm going to learn so many new things today, but Kamado Joe. Yeah. I haven't heard of that.
Kamado Joe. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. The big green egg is the same type of grill. So if you've heard of that,
I know that. Yeah. I know the big green egg. Yep.
Yeah. I think big green egg is more popular up north. And then your Kamado Joe is like the Southern belt, right? The Bible Belt, basically. Kamado Joe rules.
Well, and Kamado Joe's a newer company than Big Green Egg. Big Green Egg's been around for a lot longer, but Kamado Joe, they're just better now. Big Green Egg has not really updated their stuff, and Kamado Joe has made it way more versatile, but in my opinion. But I'm not the professional. I'm just I'm a side cook.
Yeah, you wish. Oh my gosh.
But yeah.
Well, tell us a little bit about. So I know, and I said starting your own carpet cleaning business. Zero Res is like the carpet cleaning business. They're a behemoth, from what I know. So tell me an entry point. How basically the origin story. Give me an origin story. I've heard some from Tom. I know it's a big part of your family. Give me a little bit of an origin story.
Yeah, so my dad, back in the 80s, was working in the oil industry, and he did that for, 12 years, and then started his own company in the oil industry, and he learned a lot about chemicals and chemical engineering, and just it's an interesting field. And there was that whole oil shortage thing back in the mid 80s, and there was no oil shortage, but they created this big lie, and it shrunk the oil industry and killed a lot of competitors. and it raised prices and made it hard for the little guys to survive. And so he ended up losing his company. And, that was his first kind of entrepreneurial type thing is going to start in that company. They were doing great before all that happened. But in the process, when he lost that opportunity, he started getting into property management. And he quickly learned in that field that carpet and flooring is the biggest loss in that industry. And when they were doing that, they started their own property management firm in the 90s, and they were managing 12 different complexes, and they would lose upwards to $300,000 a year just in flooring replacement.
Wow.
And so it was a mess. And they actually officed right out of Houston, across the street from NASA, so they could see NASA every day. And my dad and his business partner Gaylord, they were just staring out. They shared offices at that time, and my dad was staring out the window, and he looked at Gaylord and he says, "We can get a man to the moon, but we don't know how to clean carpet. Like we can't clean carpet, but we got someone stepping on the moon." He says that just doesn't make any sense. And so he decided that he was going to go figure out what was going on, why the industry didn't have an answer. Well, I didn't know this, and my dad didn't know this at the time, but carpet cleaning started in the 40s by Stanley Steamer. They opened up the first carpet cleaning venture in, I think, 1945 or 47. And so here we are in the 90s, and there had been a little bit of advancement, but not a lot. And so the time they got into it, it was just everyone using the same old chemicals, same cleaners, same methods, and it doesn't work. And so they started fooling around, and it's ridiculous, but they got a rug doctor, and they started playing around with a rug doctor and put a heating element in it and heating up the water, doing all this crazy crap, constantly electrocuting themselves and just going through this whole thing.
That's how all good ideas start. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Let's shock therapy.
That's right.
We're gonna plug right into that energy. So they did that, but before they actually went there, I should say they called every carpet cleaner they could imagine between Dallas and Houston to try and clean these carpets and fix the problem. You know what happens with carpet when it gets wet? It stinks. Spots reappear. The chemicals, they can't get them all out, so it leaves it sticky and tacky when it dries. There's just so many issues after you get your carpet cleaned. You would hear from your carpet installer, "Hey, go as long as you can without cleaning your carpet because it only gets worse after that," right? And so they were just stuck between a rock and a hard spot with this whole issue and all the money they were losing. And their investors, they demand profitability in that industry big time. They are not going to play around. They'll just sell the property if they're losing that money. And so for my dad and Gaylord, they needed to manage all those properties in order to feed their families. Gaylord had 7 or 8 kids and my dad had 10. And so losing a property, that's like shaving $2-3 grand off your check just like that in a month. And so they were really concerned about that and maintaining the profit margin so that these investors would keep the property and not sell it. And that's how they got really just fed off of that energy. Instead of just saying there's no way we can fix this, let's just get cheaper carpet and let's get rid of carpet, let's not do X, Y, and Z, we'll try and do this and that. They just said, no, we're going to fix the problem. And it took them years of R&D and failure. And they finally came up with a system and patented it, the full system, in 2000. And so now along that way, they started other companies of carpet cleaning. One of them was Venturi. And Venturi actually became the largest singular entity in the industry. They had something like 250 trucks nationwide owned by one corporate office. And they ended up selling that off because it was kind of an overinflated gorilla, and they had lost control of it. And And once they did that, there were some patent agreements that the investors who bought it from them had to agree to, and they said they would, but then they didn't. And so it left my dad where he didn't have to wait. He could go start his own company almost 9 months after that venture. And that's when Zero Res started. And they didn't even call it Zero Res. They called it AquaCare.
AquaCare.
Lame. Am I right? Yeah. That's good.
So, yeah, it's a weird name because it sounds like a pool cleaning company or something like that.
It does, yeah.
Or water filtration, right? But my dad was like, well, it's all about this water that he found. It's called electro-oxidative water, or they call it powered water or empowered water. If you have a certain machine, you can call it empowered water. That machine is owned by EAU. But at any rate, we have this water. It's patented for cleaning in the residential and commercial.
And how did he find that water? I mean, or how was that part of the years of research and development? And did he create it or he found it? I mean, yeah, how did that happen?
He kind of fell into it. So he was in Japan because he had bought so many UD trucks for the carpet cleaning. It was such a big deal that the head people from Nissan, who owned UD at that time, flew him and Gaylord to Japan, and they brokered a deal because my dad had a fleet of so many vans. And in that process, he found out about this water because they use it in Japan like crazy. They use it to clean their hospitals, and there's two sides of the water. There's a cleaning side, which is Primicide B, and then you have a disinfectant side, which is Primicide A. And they used A to kill all the bad guys in their hospitals because the bugs can't get used to it. It's a physical kill. It uses an electrical charge, and it charges every bacteria virus has a membrane around it. It's a lipid membrane, and it uses that to breathe and to excrement and also to eat. It goes through this membrane. Well, the water will actually charge that membrane and puncture it. And when it does that, it will flood in with moisture or air or whatever and cause the cell to explode. And they call that cell lysis, or it just bleeds out and dies. It's as if I were to stab Tom, he would just bleed and die. The same thing happens to that cell. They can't get immune to it. And so the water is actually amazing. It's listed as a cleaner and sanitizer on the B side through the EPA, and it's also listed as a disinfectant on the A side through the EPA. And so it's
but it's not harmful to me and you.
No, you can drop it in your eye. The A and B, it won't hurt you. You can drink it. If you drink more than a cup, it'll probably give you the runs. It doesn't taste great.
Well,
but
so I think that's incredibly interesting. Just that I haven't ever thought of that. Thinking about a problem. So they had a problem, right? Your dad and his partner, they had a problem, had to solve it. And that makes so much sense to me now. And I've just never really thought about it before. There probably are solutions out there, maybe not in our country, but foreign, and it sounds like he kind of fell backwards into it, but he already knew the problem he had and like, oh, this could be a solution. But going foreign to find out what they do for that problem, that's just an interesting concept I hadn't thought of before.
Well, and there was these machines that you could get. You can still get them. That they do this. They make this water, and it's a little countertop unit. They're crazy expensive. A lot of them are like $6,000, but you can make drinking water out of them, high pH drinking water, or you can convert it and it'll make your own B water and A water.
I've seen this. It's in it's in Will Brady's house. His wife swears by it. Now,
is that Kangen water? Kangen?
Yeah, Kangen water. They talk about how if you get the pH level up to she's like, if you take like a level 9 and you drink a glass of it, you're going to be hitting the toilet in about 30 seconds, a few minutes, right? It just goes right through you because she has a cleaning level on there that she can get cleaning water to disinfect things. But then she can have drinking water too.
Yeah, and drinking water, as long as you're not mixing it with a salt.
That first one right there, Dawson, that you highlighted on. Scroll up on that first row. Nope.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the first row. 7th on the first row. Oh, now, yeah. To the right of the blue bottle. Yeah, that one. That's the exact one that I've seen at people's homes.
Holy shnikes, $3,000. And
Yeah.
I know you said, Seth, like $6,000, something like that. That's
Well,
great.
some of these, right? I mean, the one next to it's
Depends
$4,000.
on what you get, you know,
Yeah.
and how much water it makes per hour and all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, and I'm comparing this to back in the day. Now they're probably a little bit cheaper to get, but back in the day when they first came out, yeah, dropping $4,000 to $6,000 on them was like expected.
Jeez.
So that's where I think he first learned about it. And he used to, a long time ago, sell Amway. Did you guys remember the company Amway?
Yep, I remember Amway. Yeah, massive. They're still big.
They're still big, but they, you know, they sell everything underneath the sun.
They've lost their luster. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but you know, they still make great products, but yeah, they're not as popular as they once were. In the 90s, they were huge.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody was buying and selling Amway. And I think that's kind of through his connections where he found out about that product. But as far as making it, you know, commercially, that had eluded him at that time. They intrigued my dad. If you met my dad is a dreamer. He is constantly thinking about the next latest and greatest thing. You know, he's basically retired, but he just never stops. His mind is always moving. He's always thinking. And my dad operates, and where I've, you know, learned from my dad is to operate without fear. If you believe something, you know, you got to do what it takes to go make it happen. And so that's what him and Gaylord did, and they never stopped. And, you know, Gaylord was always kind of the silent guy in the background, I say, but I mean, trust me, he has his opinions. He's very strong minded as well, and was right next to my dad. But my dad was the pusher, no doubt about it. And so he is the reason why I've stuck with this for so long, is all that he's put into it and the energy that he's brought to it. But it's a real thing, and it answers all the major issues in the industry. That water allowed us to create cleaning products that don't leave residues. And so there's a laboratory in Dalton, Georgia called PTL Laboratories, and any carpet cleaner that wants to get registered and weighed and measured on how good they are, they go there, and they have a bronze, silver, gold, and now platinum level cleaning process. And when we went to go get tested there in Dalton, Georgia, there was only bronze, silver, gold level. We scored so high on the charts that they created a new level called a platinum. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's funny, right?
With no chemicals, just water.
No, we use chemicals, but the difference is in water is a chemical. Remember that, Tom.
That's a good point.
Gosh,
That's a good point.
Tom.
I'm
Remember.
sorry. I'm not a chemist.
Well, that's cool, Tom. That's like kindergarten stuff. So let's
come on, Tom.
Hold on. Let me rewind.
There you go. But yeah, they when they got there, you get on this robotic arm, you put your wand there, you can only pull the trigger. They take a carpet and ruin it, and basically say, if you can clean this and get it out, then this is your level, right? Most everyone scores a bronze. Like, that's just the typical score. There's a few companies at that time that scored a gold, but we scored so high because we removed 98% of the water that we used. We removed every bit of the cleaning agent we used. We had zero reattracting residue in the test. And we extracted over 90% of the soil that was in the carpet. And soil is anything foreign to the fiber. So dust, dirt, whatever it is. And nobody had ever done that. Well, it's very political in the industry because it's been around for a long time. Once the word got out that we scored a platinum, there's some big players that complained and said it's not fair that we got this. And so they actually removed our platinum rating. Yeah,
they reneged on it.
They totally did. And then to try and make up for it, they got the carpet manufacturers involved, and we were the first carpet cleaning company to receive a personal letter of endorsement from Mohawk and Shaw. And so we did get that.
So that made up for it.
Yeah. And,
So-
you know, it's really ridiculous that we're here in the 2000s and no one's ever gotten a letter of recommendation from the manufacturers and until Zero Res. So now the reason why the platinum thing got taken away is because they basically said, you don't go platinum unless you can do what Zero Res does. So they brought back the platinum, but they loosened up the rules so that other people could play in that realm.
So that it was actually attainable, because Zero Res level was next level and unattainable.
Well, it still is in the industry. You can't, ChemDry is trying. I'll credit them. They are trying to get to our level, but they're not there yet.
So is your process patented or is it secret? So how have competitors not caught up?
It's patented.
It's patented. Okay.
So they've got to come up with a different way to do it.
Yeah, we patented it back in 2000. The patent went up a couple years ago, and then we were able to repatent. You have to be able to repatent. You've got to show like a 30% change in the process.
Oh, really? That's great. Yeah.
So we were able to prove that we got a 30% change in development, and we were able to repatent it again. And
So
we were getting more patents, in fact, than we did the first time as well.
So if you could, I don't know if you can at all, or if this is something you talked about your dad, but I mean, how much time, I know you said years, how much time did it take from thought, the conception of the idea to it actually happening? How much time would you think passed?
It was a decade easy.
Okay. Wow. And then how much money do you think they put into research and development?
Millions.
Wow.
Millions. Wow.
And were they running their property like, obviously it wasn't huge yet, right? So, and I don't know if they were profiting off it yet or until after that decade, but where did this money come from? How did they get this millions? Was it from their property management business, or where did it come from?
So to get the research, a large portion of the research and development was done through Venturi. And in Venturi, they raised money. They went all across the country and managed properties to get this done. So, they raised a lot of money.
So with the current business that they were running, they were raising capital and then putting it towards research to say, hey, we like Venturi, but this other company has some wheels. Let's put money into it.
Well, the Venturi was the first carpet cleaning company.
Well, that's what I mean. But I guess this research or this idea has merit. So let's put money towards that research.
Yes. Yeah. And so they were able to develop a truck, and it was a Vortex unit. Oh, man, that would have been, I guess before we went to Vortex, we worked off of Chevy and Dodge pickups is what we did. And they would run a Pro Chem unit off of it, but they would use this water because everything at that point was about the water. There was no other technologies. Now we have two other things that we've invented that help the process, but it was all about the water. And the funny thing is they weren't even using the right water. They were using the disinfectant, and it was ridiculous because we'd go in there and clean this carpet. We'd have to spike it with the strongest cleaning agents in the world to try and clean. And we really weren't any better than anybody else at that time, at Venturi time. And it was called pH 5000, and it was pH 5000. I mean, it was some aggressive cleaning agent, but, and the A water smells like chlorine. And so you're like cleaning with the A water, it smells like chlorine. And then you're using pH 5000. I mean, it smelled like a chemical bucket at the time you were done in the house. But, they didn't realize that the B water was the cleaner. There wasn't enough understanding about it at that moment. And so my dad, right before the Venturi thing ended up kind of collapsing, he figured out that the B water is the one they should be using. But they were just flushing the B water down the drain. Wow. And fill all these vans up with A water. And so
And what was your dad's background? I mean, how did that click, or how did he realize that? I mean, was that from his time in Japan? Or, I mean, how did he realize that
I
was
don't.
what needed?
I can't remember what and how he figured out the B water side. Because you got to. I mean, they had probably been using the A water for 7 or 8 years before he finally realized that it's total garbage to clean with it.
7 or 8 years.
Oh yeah.
So there was
Wow.
really no good solution out there. And then you mentioned about Venturi, so and how much they spurred the R&D for this. I mean, so did your dad go to Venturi? I mean, what was his affiliation with them at the time? Did he go and say, "I have a better idea, better
No, he
mousetrap"?
started Venturi. He and
He
Gaylor.
started it.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, they
Okay.
went around the country to raise the funds they needed to go create this new cleaning technology and product, and they had convinced a lot of people. They got the money they needed, and then they were able to start building their own units in-house, custom make them.
So
Because you have to carry Bay water.
did they go to private investors? Did they go to, I mean, people within their network, or just?
Yeah. They they knew investors, and so they go into investment firms and people that they knew, because of the property management. They knew a lot of owners, right, and connections.
How much equity were they giving up to some of these?
A lot. They gave up a lot of equity.
Are we talking 40%, 60%? What are we?
They always maintained control, but they gave away millions of shares, millions.
Wow. Okay.
And the thing is, the whole thing imploded. That company imploded, and most of those investors, they didn't make any money off of it.
And that's Venturi.
Mm-hmm.
So Venturi, let's say, okay, your dad's in there. He's with his business partner. Venturi's they're about to implode. How far into the process was he with the zero res concept? He hasn't called it zero res yet, but validating that concept before he closes the doors on Venturi.
Well, he was going to make it Venturi forever. He was going to introduce all the new ideas and everything through Venturi. Venturi imploded because of investors, not because the idea wasn't going to come to fruition. Now, they had to get more investors because they had grown it and to a certain extent where it just didn't work. And so they did have to sell enough shares where they were no longer going to be in control of it. But the investors still, or not in control, they still would be leading the company, but they wouldn't be the majority owners anymore.
Right. If a major decision was made, vote came to push, they had no control over it.
Right. But they wanted my dad there. And
Sure they did, yeah.
And but they had a hard time with his partner Gaylord, and my dad is loyal to everyone that he knows, and so my dad said, if you want me a part of the company, then Gaylord's got to be with me, and they ended up breaking ties. And if my dad would have stayed there and then reinvented the process like he was going to, Venturi would be the company. But they decided that they wanted to just have my dad and not Gaylord, and my dad wasn't going to have it. So the B side and all that was not patented under Venturi. Mm-hmm. So he could already patent that process and go do it, but he had to sign a non-compete. Mm-hmm. And so he wouldn't be able to do it for years down the road, but he still could have done it, and it would have become what it is today still. But the investment group, they did not keep their end of the bargain, and so the non-compete became worthless. And so not even a year later, my dad took the last $140,000 he had and created AquaCare, and then got the B side and all this other thing and those things patented fairly quickly.
How long did it take him to patent? I have no idea how long it takes to patent a product. How long did it take him to patent that?
Sometimes patent takes a long time. Okay. It takes longer to re-patent than to patent, but it's just money. If you got the money and you
can push it through fairly fast.
Yeah, and as long as it's a legitimate patent, something worth patenting, there's science behind it. You can prove it, stuff like that. You can get a patent pretty quick. It doesn't take a long time.
And just I'm going to play 5-year-old here, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Like if I
Three,
have the money, great. I got $2 million to throw at a patent.
3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months. Okay.
Yeah, it can be patented.
And
So how long did your dad have to go from Venturi before AquaCare? Like, was he unemployed for a long time, find other stuff, or was it like, hey, I'm a few months in and I'm changing?
So they had another company, and they were just able to keep grinding. But he started AquaCare really quickly.
Wow.
It was less than a year. He was able to start that venture.
Okay.
So he knew he had something, and then that non-compete became invalid, so he really could take off. And so eventually, we know that AquaCare turned into Zero Ez, which I think many people are familiar with. Before I even knew you, and Tom's told me about you previously and prior, but before I knew you, I know Chad Barnes really well. And
Oh, yeah.
then do you know? Then somebody from my mission runs a Zero Ez out in California, Enrique Escamilla. Do you know him by chance?
I don't know Enrique, but that California, the ownership in those areas has changed. I don't know, half a dozen times. I used
Okay.
to know every owner in California, but
Okay.
it's changed hands. But I do know Chad. Chad's my boy.
Chad's.
I actually helped train Chad.
Well, yeah, that's what Tom told me. That's incredible. And I know Chad's been doing it a long time. So he actually, when my brother-in-law, before he became my brother-in-law, he moved to North Carolina to date my sister, yada, yada. But he needed work, and Chad was just starting at that time, and he went to work for Chad. Yeah, we go way back, and I know he's done really well with what he's done with Zero Ez. So talking about and I know I'm skipping a lot here, but AquaCare to Zero Ez franchising. I mean, how did that all unroll to really become what it became today?
That's man, there's so much history in that. And I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, Zero Ez was a mess.
Really?
Oh yeah, my dad is a dreamer. He's not an applier. Like he can tell you the concept. He can develop a concept. He can get everybody together in the room, but the functionality of the business is not his strength. And so,
And I think, Seth, that's where I really am so intrigued on how you helped pick up some of those pieces to get Zero Ez to what it is, like literally today on February 1st, right? Not necessarily give me the story today, but hey, how did you get involved as an owner? I know you joined in 2004. I joined, but been working there since 2004. 2015 became an owner, but to Keaton's point, yeah, I mean, Zero Ez is a mess. That's a surprise to hear when there was, a good vision with Venturi. AquaCare is formed, but you're telling me Zero Ez was right.
yeah, it was crazy. But businesses, I mean, let's be honest. If you want to go start your own company, it's ugly. I mean, it's not easy. It's a dogfight, and most people quit because they
This is
lack the
true.
courage. They lack the courage and commitment. That's what it is. They don't have the gumption and faith to stick through it, and so they come up with an idea. It gets hard. Now the luster of the idea gets worn off, and they blame that for the reason why they don't want to be successful in that industry, and they quit instead of figuring out the problems and looking themselves in the mirror and say, what can I fix? What needs to go right? How can I help this be better? How do I change it? They don't want to ask those questions because nobody wants to answer that question. Nobody wants to do those hard things. And so if you want to run a business, you got to be prepared to ask yourself those types of questions, and you have to ask them every day. And if you're not willing to do that, then you really need to ask yourself, do I want to be an entrepreneur? Because at the end of the day, you're either playing with your money alone or a bunch of other people's money. And it's not an easy situation because people, they don't like to lose their money, and they want answers now. And they want investors will be patient because they want the idea to come to fruition. But there's always a stopping point where, okay, hey man, this is not working out. We're spinning our wheels. What's going on? And that becomes a really hard thing, a hard process. And so you're either asking that of yourself, or you have to ask. People are going to ask you that question, right?
Mhm.
And so Zero Res was definitely in that situation, and in many moments, because you're figuring out what you want it to be. Do you want it to be singly owned? Do you want it to go public? Do you want to franchise it? Do you want to license it? I mean, how do you want this idea to truly come to fruition? How do you keep the integrity of the process and the product, so that it doesn't get diluted? And it always does get diluted, but it doesn't get diluted so far where there's no coming back. And so all these things, is what made it a messy situation. And anyone who runs a franchise, I like that.
That's a
That's
good
fine.
one. That's exactly what Seth just described right there.
Yes. Yeah, and you do feel that way. I mean, there were so many nights that I would come home and I'd ask myself, "Is this worth it?" You
So when
know,
did you start, and how did you, obviously son, but how did you start into it or decide, you know what, I'm gonna go into this?
yeah. So, um, I don't want to get too spiritual, I guess, on this, because I know that you got to make it for the masses. But when I was on my mission before I left, I was like, I'm never going to work carpet cleaning again. I want to go do something else. I had been doing it for a long time, off and on. But even before I left on my mission, I'd work every holiday, every spring break, every summer.
Wow.
I was working, and every Christmas break I was working. And so my dad made it very clear to me at a young age I was going to work. But I left, and I just didn't want anything to do with it. But my mission president, before I came home, asked me, "Hey, what is your plans? What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, I don't know." And he goes, "Well, you need to figure it out." And I said, "Well, I'm still on my mission." He's like, "Yeah, that's true, but you got to start figuring it out." So, let's just say I wanted to get to Texas, and I needed to get to Texas after my mission. I felt that. And the best avenue to get there was to work at Zero Res with my brother. And so in 2004, in March of 2004, I flew down there and moved in with my brother for about a month until I could get my own place, and then started working at Zero Res. And I was nothing. I was just another tech, and I was bad at it. I was not a good salesman. Yeah, it wasn't very funny at the time. So
You didn't have a beard either, did you?
no beard.
That's why if you had that, you'd have been fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
See?
probably. Yeah. Yeah, funny fact, has nothing to do with running a business. I didn't even know I had a red beard until I was in my 30s, because I'd always
What?
shave my face. Yeah.
That's how long it took you to grow a beard?
Well, I always shaved. My dad made it very clear to me, a grown man shaves his face, period. Businessman
So was that like a rebellious day when you were just like, screw that, I'm growing it?
100.
You were like, it's about to go down.
It's going down. Dad, this is what I think about this. I'm growing a beard. And he hated it. Oh man, he hated when I grew that beard.
Was Marguerite, your wife, was she just like, oh, yes?
No, she hated the beard too.
Okay. All right. Nobody liked you around.
I was like, look, I don't like ponytails. You wear them every day. So deal with it.
That's great.
She actually doesn't mind it now, though. It's grown on her, and she's good.
That's good. I've seen you shave once in the 5 years I've. Yeah, in the 5 years I've known you, and yeah, don't ever shave again. You look really good with a beard.
Hey, Tom,
You look really good without one.
I know where you live, Tom.
Yeah. Honey, we need to move.
No, so at any rate, I came down here, and it did not go well. In fact, I got into 2 major car accidents. One of which I almost killed 2 people. I got heat exhaustion in the truck, and passed out from heat exhaustion while I was driving, and hit 2 people at a stoplight in their car, and
Wow.
they got life flighted, and I got carted off in the ambulance and checked out. And My brother ended up firing me actually a couple days later because he says, "Hey man, the insurance can't handle you on the insurance." So I was actually at that point I was like, "Well, I'm not going to stay in Texas." So I was thinking about going to California. But before I made that decision, I went and prayed about it and got the answer not to do that. So, and then a day or so later, my brother called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come back and work? We've kind of figured things out." So um, I decided to stick it out, and I made a commitment to myself that I was never going to leave Zero Res unless it failed or we sold it.
Wow.
And so I made that commitment. I was in. It was either sink or swim, and I was going to become great at the craft. Now, I was not an owner. I had no promises. I had no nothing. Bo at that point was a partner in that base, but that partnership dissolved, and Bo got shipped to another base in Houston.
And Bo's your brother.
Yes, yeah, Bo's my brother, and he got shipped to Houston, and I was by myself again in Dallas, and they shut the radio off, and it was just super hard and ugly, and I had to go knock doors to find work. And a year later, my brother showed back up at the Dallas base, and we kind of figured things out, and we went back to work. And there wasn't a lot of work, and we would give the jobs to the techs, and I should have gotten jobs too. I wasn't an owner yet either, but I did follow my brother, and I wanted to learn everything that he had already learned and what he was learning as well. And so we'd go knock doors in Capel. That was our golden spot. And we'd pick up a job, and we ended up popping it for $1,000, and we made a living doing that for 3 years. It was constant, the base just didn't. You go open a base and you don't realize all the capital money you need. You gotta be able to buy the franchise, and you need extra money to advertise, and you got to make sure you have all these things lined up in order to not feel the pain, a lot of the pain. And we didn't do that. And so
how much was a franchise at that time?
Depending on the amount of people within the cities you were buying.
Okay.
So
let's say the ones you guys were looking at, like, man, I really wish I could buy this one.
So now, like Houston, Texas, if you want to go buy that now, you're looking at probably $1.5 million for that whole area.
Okay.
But if you wanted to go to Waco, you're probably looking at 120. It all depends on how many people are within that demographic. So, but and it's probably more than 120. It's probably more like 170, because the truck itself is, that first truck is going to run you close to 90 grand. So,
and I know you've gone through a large equity group buying, right? And you were instrumental in that. So is it still Zero Res? Is it still franchisable? I mean,
absolutely.
How is it? Yeah. And so what if Keaton Epps, I'm in Raleigh or near Raleigh, North Carolina. I want to start a Zero Res franchise today. I know what you just said. Depends on demographic or population density. What all else is it going to take for me to start one?
So, buying the franchise is the easy part, right? And I guess the biggest thing you gotta make sure that you have a good marketing strategy from the get. And I would also say it's important to know the area that you're purchasing. You need to know the clientele, the most popular radio stations, the age group that you're looking for is usually between 35 and 50, and you need to know what advertising they accept and how you can get that demographic to purchase. And because before then, anybody in their 20s, the last thing they're typically thinking about is cleaning their carpet. It's usually parents. Once you have children, you start thinking, man, my child to be
children, pets, bills,
Yeah.
all this stuff. And
Yeah.
advertising, I feel like, is such a deep subject. And we could go on and on for marketing and advertising in different amounts. Do you think a zero res franchise could succeed without franchising? Let's say the first year. Could they even survive?
Oh, that all depends on the
They did what you and Bo did: knock doors, right? Offer carpet
you
clean.
can do that. I mean, the biggest thing is that you just gotta out when you're thinking of that is that you know how to manage your money. If you know how to manage your money and you're ready to go hit the grind and the grind doesn't terrify you and you're ready to go knock doors, do whatever you got to do, well, then just manage your money and you're going to be just fine. But, because guerrilla marketing, only thing it costs is time, and maybe a couple dollars and some flyers. But it's harder now to do guerrilla marketing because there's so many neighborhoods that don't want you in there knocking their doors.
Non-solicitations.
Yeah, and it's all in the HOAs and all that stuff. Now, there's few companies that get away with it, because and you can always go get a license from the city, but you still have to honor the HOAs. But when you just had a bunch of hell, and you're selling a roof to get it fixed, you're gonna get away with doing that, right? Carpet cleaning, going and knocking on your door and saying, "Hey, I'm cleaning your neighbor's carpet." It's starting to tick people off. They don't want you selling on their doorstep, right? And so, not that it's impossible to do guerrilla marketing, but I will tell you the strategy of radio combined with internet and money mailer and stuff like that, hitting the targeted demographics that you're looking for, knowing the cities and zip codes you want to hit, it's extremely important and vital to the success of your company. So whatever area you purchase, you need to know where your buying power is. So for us here in Dallas, we do jobs everywhere, but the majority of our business comes from Frisco, McKinney, Plano, Allen, Little Elm, North Dallas, Murphy. It's just I would say 60% of the money we make comes out of those areas. And so
what if you being now, everything, you're, I'm sure, one of the most knowledgeable people within the company. You've been around it your whole life. You worked a long time. Say you had to start all over, zero as existed, but not, and you didn't know about it, but you wanted to open a franchise. You only have a few $1,000s in your pocket. What would you do? But you knew, you believed in zero as, you believed in that franchise. Where would you get the money to start? How would you do it? And then you hit on a little bit, internet and radio. I mean, how would you get those internet ads? Like, would you contract that work out? What radio, how would you get into the radio station? Like, we talk about the nitty gritty. Imagine that scenario. You only have a few $1,000s, but this will work. You're a dreamer. This is your dream. How would you make it happen? Knowing everything but starting over from scratch.
Well, I would have to find a partner that had some money as well.
Okay.
And I would never recommend somebody opening up a business on their own. I would recommend that you always have a partner. You can't do it by yourself. Not in this industry. You need someone to lean on. You need a different thought process. You need somebody sometimes to slap you and wake you up because it's really easy to get negative. And so opening up a company on your own is dangerous, in my opinion. And so the first thing, if I had money and I could open up a company, I would want another partner, and I want him 50-50 with me. I want us both bought in and passionately engaged, right? And then after that, it's just finding out your demographic and then finding a good advertising firm, and they're everywhere. And you don't have to find the best of the best because you're just starting out. Your costs are going to be low. You're not going to buy a big, huge building. You're only going to have a couple of employees. If you're smart, you'll start out of your house, or you'll rent a storage facility and work out of that, and do something small and have very, very low costs and maintain that until you're running 5 or 6 trucks. Because once you hit that 5 or 6 truck mark, the profit margins start flowing in and everything starts to make sense. As long as you start with a decent amount of cash. And the other thing is, I would also open up a line of credit. That's so important as an owner in a company. You can start with the initial investment, but opening up a line of credit is important because if you're not profitable in a month, well, you lean on that credit to float you, and then when you're hitting your profit margins, you just pay off that credit line slowly. Or
and how I was gonna ask that, how does a startup franchise, great, some guys, right? Maybe it was you that only had a couple $1,000. Now you've gotten some financing from your business partner. You've now been able to buy a zero res. How do you get that line of credit though? I've
so
seen
I
many
mean,
banks that just go, oh, well, you need, 6 months of profit, or you need 2 years of tax returns for that company. Sorry, the best thing we can do is give you a $1,500 credit card. Here you go. Like
well,
how do you go about getting that line of credit?
well, I would encourage you to go to a credit union and open up a credit union account and start
Mhm.
creating a relationship with a local credit union. And that's what we've done here in Texas. And you need to make friends with people at that credit union. You need to get to know them. You need to make make it personal, and you need to flood as much money as you can into that credit union. You want a car loan, get a car loan through that credit union, and let them see and create a path of history with them. And when they see that you have a good relationship with them and you pay your debts, you got money in the account. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
$400,000, but let's say you got 50 grand in that account, and you're always adding to it and you're always paying your debts off. Well, when you go to open up a line of credit, well, they're going to ask, for some type of equity, right? And so you got to create a little bit of equity in yourself and have something to offer. And between you and your partner, you should be able to come up with some equity to get a line of credit. And, the more, the better, you know. Now, obviously, you got to function intelligently off that line of credit. You don't want to just go spend it. But one thing that helped us is we were able to get $700,000 in a line of credit, and
Holy cow! Yeah.
it floated us through a lot of things over the last 4 or 5 years. And
And you would say the majority of the reason you got that 700,000 is that good long-term relationship that you built with that credit union.
well, my dad created a relationship with some bankers here,
Mhm.
and my dad is just such a personable guy, and if you ever meet my dad, you'll just love him, right?
Oh,
And
I've met him. He's a good guy. He's hard to hate. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and he created that relationship and helped us introduced us into a bank called Happy State here in
Okay.
Texas. Now we're not using them anymore. They've changed ownership, but the guy that we work with at Happy State went to another credit union that we linked up with, and so we're using that bank now. But you get to a point where that credit line just doesn't really mean anything anymore. But to start your business, it means everything.
And
And
so, and going back to starting the business, so say you are that one with just a few $1,000s. You said go find a business partner, probably with some more. What what if you can't? Do you just find a good paying job, something you're good at, work for somebody else until you have built up enough equity to get a line of credit, have built up enough cash assets? I mean, is that what you would do? And that's been a theme I've seen. I think I already know the answer to this because this has been a theme in your story. How long it takes to do something. I heard a lot of 1 year, 5 year, decades. Like it hasn't been, oh yeah, my dad had this thought and then he presented it to these people. They invested a lot of money. It worked out great. Zero Res was up and going in 5 years. And after the conception of the thought, I mean, it's been grit, it's been time, it's been effort, it's been lots of money. But yeah, for somebody that has nothing that wants to start out, they got to get that cash from somewhere. So you would say go find the highest paying job you can for a while to build up and save and build equity. Is that What would you recommend?
You got to do that. If you don't have anybody else, you've got to be able to create equity somewhere else to be able to afford a franchise in anything. Maybe you could get away with, and maybe what you do is you start a smaller adventure like window cleaning, right? And you do that as a side gig, and you let that mushroom into something, and then you create a company off of window cleaning, and then that propels you to get into some other business, because people who start a zero res, it's typically not their first startup. They've done other things, or they've worked in major industries. Like some of our franchisees, they graduated from MIT. I mean,
Wow.
it's no longer a mom and pop type of franchise. You need experience to open up a zero res.
What are some of the other things? I mean, you mentioned MIT. What are some of the other things you've noticed, industries they've come from, businesses they've owned, or whatever high paying jobs that they were in? What have some of your franchisees, where have they come from?
So some of them have come from family members that had money, and they started their franchise from a grandfather or a father-in-law or a father, right? Investing into them. Others, they came from an investment hinges, and they were already millionaires before they started their deal. But the old G's on the block, when you could get away with not being a big time guy and just a hard worker, because the franchises didn't cost as much as they do now. But those guys paid. They paid in blood, sweat, and tears. They suffered through a lot of bad decisions. And there's a core of about 12 franchises that paid such a hard price to help get this where it is now. I paid a very small price in the national view of zero res. There's a lot of other people that paid a much greater price, but in Dallas, 100%, if Bo and I had not dug in, Dallas wouldn't be where it is now. And I do believe that. Now, our partnership, the partners that we have, we've not always got along, and we've not always seen eye to eye, and we've made bad decisions, and we had to suffer through a lot of messed up moments. And it's really easy to bail on people and to look at people in fragile moments of bad decisions and want to leave and judge them and break up the group. But one thing I've learned is in the business world, if you want to be successful, yeah, you got to be tenacious and ferocious, and you got to go put everything into it. But you got to have people around you. You got to be able to work with people, and people make mistakes. And if you think for one moment you're going to start a business and your business partner that you join with is going to do everything right, be honest all the time, be perfect in all his dealings, you're crazy. Because it's very easy when everything is on the line, when you've put all your money and everything that you own into it, to make a selfish decision to try to protect yourself and your children and everyone. And business partners do dumb things sometimes. But if you can work through those moments, come back together, get passionate again, re-engage, work in building the trust again, reestablish it, get back on your haunches, you will win. You will absolutely win, but you cannot do it on your own. Business is hard. And whether you're working with family or a partner, it's still the same. I've worked with my brother for years. I don't have a problem doing that, but I also don't have a problem being scolded. I don't have a problem being told I got to change. I don't have a problem addressing hard things. I don't have a problem taking life on. I had a really hard childhood, and it taught me a lot of lessons. I'm colorblind. I didn't figure that out until I was 14. I'm dyslexic. I didn't figure that out until I was in my 30s, when I had diagnosed my son with dyslexia through all this stuff. And I realized, oh, I had all those things. I'm a high school dropout. I got my GED. I was constantly bullied all the way to 9th grade. It wasn't until my 10th grade year while all that stuff disappeared. I was a loner. And at that time in my life, around 18, I made a decision that I was going to go serve people and I was going to try and change my life. And I was not confident. I didn't think a lot of myself. I had a lot of mental anguishes, and my childhood just was weird. It was very just chaotic and disruptive. My dad wasn't home a lot. He was always gone. And I was in a house full of 7 girls. It was just, crazy. And me and my brothers are not close in age. Bo's 5 years older than me, and I'm 10 years older than Mitchell.
Wow.
Bo's 15 years older than Mitchell. So, it's a weird dynamic there. And so, I know why I had a lot of reasons why I had a hard time early on and constantly being bullied and going through all these issues. I was a nice kid. I was kind, loving, considerate. I was quiet. I didn't do anything to people, but I was always finding myself in the crosshairs of people's anger and issues, whether I was at school, at church, at home. It was just a constant thing. But I learned a lot about myself, and I learned that in life, if I want something to happen, I've got to go make it happen. It's not what people do to me. It's how I react to it. It's what I choose to become. And if you want to go start a business, that's the way you got to view it, because you're going to get hit hard. You're going to think everything's going fine, and then boom, a lawsuit's on your table, or boom, 4 people quit, or boom, you got to drop another 30 grand in advertising to make something work, or boom, my partner told me he doesn't want to be a part of this anymore. And you got to work through these problems. And I'm reading a book called Crucial Conversations right now. I recommend it. It was referred to me by another franchisee in Zero Res. And I'm reading it. We're going through it as a group. And it's amazing. And it's all about going through sticky situations, but learning how to win through those situations, communicate appropriately, because the only time you lose in business is when you lose your cool, you don't communicate anymore, and things come crashing down, because you can work through some really crazy, hard things if you can just stay together. But doing a business on your own, you have to have a partner. You need one. And anyone I know who's successful, he's not gotten there by himself. He's always had a group of people that have helped him get there.
And that reminds me, there's a show I used to watch. I can't even remember what it's called, but he talked about the 3 Ps. People was the first and the priority. Processes, having a process system, standard guidebook, whatever in place, and then product. You have to have something of value that other people want or need. And yeah, your story, I hope a lot of people can hear this. I mean, it has been inspiring to me that there's the common themes kept coming up of patience. This was not a quick fly by night success. This was for your whole family, not only you, but for you, for Zero Ez. It was, like you said, a knockout, or what is it called? Knockdown, drag out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Type of deal, type of fight to be this success. And I love that study. Somebody went and studied successful people, and the demographic of this people, it wasn't how much money they came from. It wasn't how well they did in school. It wasn't, and they went on to all these factors that the world, especially I feel like our country, our education system tells us makes us successful. It was grit. And she defined grit and what grit was. And that stick-to-itiveness you've talked about, not taking offense, but listening, being cooperative. In my former life, I coached football, and as part of the staff, that was the hardest thing, was to not take offense with each other. And I saw good people leave and lose their cool, as you mentioned, and it trickles down quick, because we had our players underneath us, and as soon as there was a crack in the staff, they felt it. And if we couldn't get in a room together and work out our differences as coaches, as leaders, the divisiveness happened almost instantly. And it had to be approached and corrected swiftly, or else your season's lost. Or in this case, in business, your season of business, whatever that is, a year, 5 years, that is really going to be hit hard. But those are the themes I took out from your life and from your business story and the story of Zero Res in general. Stick-to-itiveness, grit, patience, time, creativity, relationships. You talked about your dad and your relationships and how that's really been an asset to you guys in the long run. Those are things I'm going to take from your story, Seth. And yeah, I appreciate so much your time and sharing those and being vulnerable a little bit too. And some of the difficulties you face, not only in business, but in life. And that's how you ended up being successful in business.
Well, and what I was going to say is that all those experiences led me to a decision that I'm not going to quit. If you want to be successful, you got to have no quit in you. There is no such thing as quit. You're going to take this thing to the end. And there is no plan B. There's no plan C. It's plan A, and I'm going to make it work. And if I didn't operate that way, I would have left Zero Res years ago. And that's the way you got to be as a business owner. It is a no quit proposition. You're all in, not only with your money, but with everything that you got. And if you have not come to that decision, you need to question about being an entrepreneur, because you're going to keep quitting, and then you're going to waste all your money and all your time, and all you're going to have is a bucket of debt and questioning whether you file bankruptcy or work through that debt. And so, if Zero Res with all its failures can become successful, anything can become successful, because the men who started Zero Res are not MIT grads. I know them all. They're wonderful men. They're very qualified, but more than anything, stuck together. They didn't quit. They worked out their differences, and they made the necessary changes and got their pride out of the way and allowed the company to flourish where it needed to flourish and change where it needed to change. And now, Zero is a household name, and it's becoming that. There's 116 franchises now, and that's huge. We're a young company still. We're 23 years young. And in the industry, that is young. And we're fighting people like Stanley Steamer and Kim Dry. Those guys have been around for 3 and 4 more decades than we've been around. So
half a century.
And we're kicking their butts. Yeah. So
Seth, you remind me of it's kind of
Seth,
you're kind of like the story of the guys that go out to that island, they turn around and burn the boats because they're just like, we ain't going back. All right, we're all in on this sucker. Yeah, you got some tenacity, man. Keaton mentioned grit and passion and partnerships. Resilience was one that I heard that was the key to success, right? Picking yourself back up when you do hit a wall. So I can't thank you enough, though. I feel like we've grasped a ton. We hope our listeners can take a ton from this. Anything kind of last word that you give a single piece of advice?
Just, man, be grateful for what you got, and don't allow your pride to get in the way, and really show the people that you're working for and with that you care about them. And concepts are great. Business is great, but a lasting business comes from a culture. It's a cultural event. And if people don't feel like you care for them, whether it's your partner that you're with on the business venture or the people that you're employing, you're just not going to make it, And so that's my parting thing is, if you got everything else in line, you got that no quit mentality. People got to know you care. They got to know that you're in it with them, and that you're not just some Papa Warbucks who's careless and is just about his money. No, you got to be about people. You got to invest in the people, and you got to bring people up. If you want a business to thrive, you got to create upward movement in that company, and they got to know you're in it for them, not just for the cash.
Yeah. Well, Seth, I want to say again, thank you for being on our podcast. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome, guys. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been Seth Hopkins on What It Takes. My co-host Keaton Epps. Dawson, hit it.